6 months after the Battle of Luna, Earth looked different. Sarah stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt orbital station, watching as fallen and Earthborn humans worked together to repair the damage from the Guardian War. The great ships of the Iron Fleet floated alongside Earth's own vessels, no longer enemies but partners in rebuilding. "The integration is proceeding better than expected," reported Dr. Santos, now serving as the head of the Human Reunification Council. "The genetic compatibility studies confirm what we always suspected. There never was any contamination. The fallen are as human as anyone born on Earth." Sarah nodded, but her attention was focused on the fleet of exploration vessels being constructed in the orbital shipyards. Earth's population had voted overwhelmingly to join the fallen in exploring the galaxy, to find and free other species that might be trapped in Guardian experiments. "Captain," Marcus approached with a datapad in hand. "The deep space reconnaissance teams are reporting back. We've found traces of Guardian installations in 17 other star systems. Some of them are inhabited." Sarah accepted the report, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. The war for humanity's freedom had been won, but the war for galactic liberation was just beginning. "How many ships will be ready for the first expedition?" she asked. 300 vessels fully crewed with volunteers from both Earth and the fallen colonies. Admiral Harrison will command the Earth contingent, while you'll lead the fallen forces." Sarah smiled at the irony. The man who had once tried to destroy them would now stand beside them as they ventured into the unknown. It was a fitting symbol of how much had changed. "There's one more thing," Santos added quietly. "We've been receiving signals from the outer rim. Other species, possibly other Guardian experiments. They're asking for help." Sarah looked out at the stars, remembering the words of the Guardian Zephyr. "The experiment has failed. We will begin again with a cleaner template." But humanity had proven that some experiments couldn't be controlled, that the desire for freedom was stronger than any cage. "Send word to the fleet," she commanded. "We leave in 1 month. It's time to show the galaxy what free humans can accomplish." As the sun set over Earth, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them here. 3,000 years of exile had ended not in vengeance, but in liberation. The fallen had returned home not as conquerors, but as saviors. And now, together with their Earthborn brothers and sisters, they would carry that message of freedom to the stars themselves. The age of Guardian control was ending. The age of human expansion was about to begin. Behind them, Earth turned peacefully in its orbit, no longer a prison but a launching point for humanity's greatest adventure. The children of two worlds had finally come home, and from that homecoming, they would reach out to embrace the entire galaxy. The exile was over. The real journey was just beginning. The end. The ancient warning echoed through the halls of the Galactic Council like a death knell. Commander Zexhi's 4 eyes darted between the holographic displays showing the Forbidden Zone, a sphere of space marked in blood red on every star chart. In known space. Human space. Entry. Forbidden by Galactic Treaty. 2847. Zexhi's translator barely managed to convert the guttural clicks of his native tongue. "Council Elder, with respect, this is madness. We're talking about 3 star systems, with 12 inhabitable worlds. The resources alone could feed half the galaxy." Elder Morthak's crystalline form pulsed with amber warning lights. Her species had survived 3 galactic extinctions, and when she spoke, entire civilizations listened. "Young Commander, your species has only reached the stars for 50 cycles. Mine has watched empires rise and fall for millennia. Trust me when I say, some boundaries exist for reasons beyond your understanding." The massive council chamber fell silent. Representatives from dozens of species, the graceful Velthari with their translucent wings, the towering rock-like Gorvani, the aquatic depth speakers floating in their environmental suits, all watched as Zexhi pulled up the restricted files. "But Elder, look at these numbers. Humanity went extinct over 200 years ago. We detected their last transmissions in 2847. Radio silence ever since. Whatever killed them is long gone." Morthak's form brightened to a dangerous orange. Commander, you speak of things you do not comprehend. The humans didn't go extinct, they went quiet. There's a difference. What difference? Zexhi's tactical mind raced. Dead is dead. A new voice cut through the chamber, smooth, mechanical, and carrying an edge that made every being present feel suddenly cold. The difference, Commander, is that one leaves bones, the other leaves traps. All eyes turned to the speaker. Ambassador Kithara of the Machine Collective rarely spoke in council. When they did, it was worth listening to. Their chrome-plated form moved with predatory grace as they approached the hologram. My kind has computational memory stretching back 3,000 years. We remember what the humans were before they changed. Zexhi's confidence wavered. Changed how? They started as explorers, curious, friendly. They made first contact with 17 different species in just 50 years. They shared technology, culture, even formed alliances. Kithara's optical sensors focused on the red zone. Then something happened, something they never explained. In the span of 5 years, every human ship returned to their space. Every colony ship turned around. Every ambassador went home. The chamber's lighting dimmed as Kithara activated their own holographic display. This is the last recorded communication from human space. A crackling transmission filled the air. The voice was human, young, female, speaking in their primary language with subtitles appearing in Galactic Standard. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the UES Prometheus. To any vessels receiving this transmission, turn back. Do not approach human space. Do not attempt rescue operations. Do not investigate our silence. What we've become. What we had to become. It's for the protection of everyone. The quarantine is not to keep you out, it's to keep us in. Static consumed the signal. Zexhi's 4 hearts hammered in sequence. That was over 2 centuries ago. Whatever threat they were containing is gone. By now. Is it? Morthak's form had shifted to a deep, pulsing red. Tell me, Commander, what do you know of the Void Plague? Every being in the chamber recoiled. The Void Plague was a myth, a story told to young beings to keep them from venturing too far into unexplored space. It was supposed to be fiction. The Void Plague is a legend, Zexhi whispered, but his voice carried no conviction. So were humans once. Kithara's response was delivered without emotion, which somehow made it more terrifying. Until they made contact with something beyond, the edge of mapped space, something that shouldn't exist in our dimension. The Machine Collective ambassador projected another image, this one showing the borders of human space in relation to the galactic spiral arm. Notice how human territory forms a perfect buffer zone between inhabited space and the void region. Notice how after their quarantine began, not a single void incursion has been detected in our galaxy. Zexhi studied the hologram, his military training kicking in. The pattern was unmistakable. Human space formed a wall between the civilized galaxy and something else, something dark. You're suggesting they're still fighting something we can't see? I'm suggesting, Morthak said, her ancient voice carrying the weight of eons, that they became something we couldn't comprehend. And if my calculations are correct, they've been protecting us from a threat that would consume every thinking being in the galaxy. A new alarm began blaring through the chamber. The massive central display flashed urgent red warnings. A technician's voice echoed through the speakers. Council alert. Long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures from the edge of human space. Whatever's happening out there, it's big. Zexhi looked at the display showing energy readings that defied his understanding of physics. The numbers were impossible. Power outputs that should have torn apart entire star systems. What could generate that much energy? Morthak's form cycled through colors Zexhi had never seen before. When she spoke, her voice carried a tremor of something he'd never heard from an elder. Fear. War, Commander. A war that's been raging in secret for 200 years. The chamber fell into absolute silence as every being present contemplated the same terrifying question. If humanity had been fighting for 2 centuries to keep something contained, what would happen if they lost? Chapter 2. The Expedition 3. Months after the energy readings, Zexhai stood in the bridge of the scout vessel, Wanderer's Hope, staring at the boundary marker that separated known space from the human quarantine zone. The marker itself was nothing impressive, just a simple beacon broadcasting the same warning in 57 languages. Turn back. Authorized personnel only. Trespassers will be destroyed without warning. But what made Zexhai's skin crawl was what surrounded the marker. The space itself looked wrong. Stars that should have been visible were dimmed or missing entirely. Nebulae that appeared on centuries-old charts were gone, replaced by empty voids that seemed to bend light around their edges. "Captain," called out Navigator Yixila from her station. The young Velthari's normally iridescent wings had turned a sickly gray, a sign of extreme stress in her species. "I'm reading gravitational anomalies throughout the human border. It's like space itself is twisted." Zexhai's tactical officer, a gruff Gorvani named Thok, growled from his position. "Twisted is right. Long-range sensors can't penetrate more than half a light-year into their territory. Something's actively jamming us." "Or hiding something," whispered Dr. Kesara from the science station. The depth speaker floated in her mobility tank, her bioluminescent patches flickering with patterns that indicated deep unease. "Captain, I'm detecting trace elements in the cosmic radiation that shouldn't exist. The atomic structure is all wrong, like reality itself has been edited." Zexhai had assembled this crew carefully. Each represented their species' best and brightest, volunteers who understood they might not return. The Galactic Council had officially condemned this mission, but privately, several elder species had provided resources and intelligence. Everyone wanted to know what had happened to humanity. "Engineering report," Zexhai called out. Chief Engineer Belin materialized on the bridge, literally. His energy-based species could shift between physical and quantum states at will, making them invaluable for handling exotic technologies. Currently, he flickered between states indicating high stress. "Captain, our stealth systems are operating at maximum efficiency, but I'm not sure it matters. Whatever's monitoring this border isn't using conventional sensors. I'm detecting scanning beams that penetrate our hull like it's not even there. Meaning if they wanted us dead, we'd already be atoms." The bridge fell silent as everyone processed this information. They were being watched, studied, perhaps even toyed with by something that could destroy them at will. Zexhai made his decision. "Take us in. 1 light-year, then full stop." "Sir," Thok rumbled. "Regulations state—" "Regulations don't apply here, old friend. We're beyond the law now." The Wanderer's Hope crossed the boundary. Immediately, every system on the ship began registering impossible readings. The stars outside didn't just look different, they were different. Constellations that had remained unchanged for millions of years were twisted into new configurations. Space itself seemed to ripple like water. "Captain!" Yixila's voice cracked with panic. "Navigation is useless. The stellar cartography database shows this region, but nothing matches. It's like we've entered a parallel universe." Dr. Kesara's tank churned as she processed readings from dozens of sensors. "This is fascinating and terrifying. I'm detecting pocket dimensions, folded space, areas where time appears to move at different rates. Someone has been rewriting the fundamental laws of physics in this region." "Someone or something?" Zexhai asked, though he dreaded the answer. Before Kesara could respond, every screen on the bridge lit up with the same image, a human face. But this wasn't the face of any human from the historical records. This being's eyes glowed with an inner light that seemed to pierce straight through the screen. When she spoke, her voice resonated not through the speakers but somehow directly in their minds. "Unknown vessel, you have entered restricted space. Identify yourselves and state your purpose." Zexhai stepped forward, fighting every instinct that screamed at him to run. "I am Commander Zexhai of the Galactic Council exploration vessel, Wanderer's Hope. We've come seeking answers about humanity's fate." The being's glowing eyes seemed to look directly at each crew member in turn. When her gaze fell on Zexhai, he felt as if his very soul was being examined and weighed. You seek answers. You are not prepared to understand. Turn back, Commander. Return to your safe galaxy and forget you came here. I can't do that, Zexhai replied, surprised by his own courage. The Council needs to know what happened. The galaxy deserves to know. A smile crossed the being's face, sad, ancient, and absolutely terrifying. Very well. You wish to understand. Humanity's fate? Follow the beacon to Sanctuary Station, but know this, Commander. Once you see the truth, you can never unsee it. Some knowledge comes with a price that can never be paid. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. A new signal appeared on their navigation display, a beacon leading deeper into human space, toward what their charts indicated. Had once been the Sol system. Captain, Thok said quietly, I've changed my mind. Maybe we should turn back. Zexhai looked at his crew, beings from 5 different species, each of whom had volunteered for what they knew might be a suicide mission. They deserved better than his selfish curiosity. I'm putting it to a vote. All in favor of continuing? 5 hands, claws, pseudopods, and energy manifestations rose simultaneously. Looks like we're going to see what humanity became, Zexhai said, trying to keep the tremor out of his voice. Bolin, plot a course for the beacon. Everyone else prepare for anything. As the Wanderer's hope moved deeper into the twisted space that had once been human territory, none of them noticed the shadow that detached itself from their hull, a shadow that began following them with predatory patience. Something else had noticed their presence in human space, something that the glowing-eyed human had been hoping they would never encounter. Chapter 3. Sanctuary Station. The structure that emerged from the twisted space ahead of them defied every law of physics and engineering that Zexhai knew. Sanctuary Station wasn't built. It had been grown. Organic curves melded seamlessly with crystalline structures that pulsed with their own inner light. The station stretched across several hundred kilometers, its biomechanical tendrils reaching out into space like the arms of some cosmic creature. By the ancient lights, whispered Yixela, her wings now cycling through colors that had no names. What is that thing? Dr. Kessera's tank bubbled with agitation as her sensors struggled to make sense of the readings. Captain, that structure is partially phased out of normal spacetime. Parts of it exist in dimensions I can't even detect properly. The bio readings are impossible. Impossible how? Zexhai asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. It's alive, but it's also artificial. Organic, but technological. Its reading is both a space station and a living organism. The energy signatures suggest it's drawing power directly from the fabric of reality itself. Chief Engineer Bolin flickered into full visibility, his energy form stabilizing as professional curiosity overcame fear. Captain, I'm detecting docking bay emissions ahead. They're inviting us to land. Thok's rumbling voice carried a note of unease. Sir, my tactical systems can't get a lock on anything. The station's defenses aren't hidden. They're just operating on principles I don't understand. We're completely at their mercy. We have been since we crossed the border, Zexhai replied. Take us in. The docking bay that opened to receive them was vast enough to hold a dozen ships their size. As the Wanderer's hope settled onto a landing platform that seemed to grow up from the deck to embrace their hull, Zexhai noticed something that made his blood freeze. Other ships were docked here. Dozens of them, all bearing the identification marks of various galactic civilizations. Some were designs he recognized from centuries past. Yixela, run those ship configurations through the database. The young navigator's voice was barely a whisper. Captain, some of these ships have been missing for over 300 years. They're all vessels that were reported lost near the human border. So we're not the first to ignore the warnings. No, sir, but we might be the first to arrive while the station is active. Before Zexhai could ask what she meant, the docking bay filled with a soft, golden light. When it faded, 3 figures stood waiting for them at the bottom of the gangway. The center figure was unmistakably human. But like the woman from the transmission, she had been changed. Her eyes held depths that seemed to contain starlight, and when she moved, reality seemed to bend slightly around her. The other two figures were harder to identify, beings that might have once been from known species but had been altered in ways that made them appear both beautiful and terrifying. "Welcome to Sanctuary Station," the human woman said as Zexai and his team descended from their ship. Her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in their bones. "I am Administrator Sarah Chen. You may know me from the final transmission." Zexai's four hearts skipped in sequence. "That was over 200 years ago." "Time works differently here," Chen replied with that same sad smile. "We've learned to work with it rather than against it. Please follow me. There are things you need to understand before you can return to your galaxy." "Return?" Thok rumbled. "Are we prisoners?" "No," said one of Chen's companions, a being that might have once been Velthari, but whose wings had become something that folded through dimensions Zexai couldn't perceive. "But knowledge has weight, and some truths are too heavy for unprepared minds to carry." They were led through corridors that defied architectural logic, where walls curved in directions that shouldn't exist, and windows showed vistas of space that included stars from impossible angles. Other beings moved through the station, some recognizably from galactic civilizations, others so transformed that their original species was unguessable. "What happened to them?" Dr. Kisara asked, her tank's translation system struggling with the complexity of her distress signals. "They chose to help us," Chen replied. "When the Void began its incursion 3 centuries ago, representatives from 47 species came to offer aid. They stayed to become part of the solution." "The Void," Zexai said. The elder spoke of a void plague, but she said it was contained. Chen stopped walking and turned to face them. When she did, the corridor around them shifted, walls becoming transparent to reveal the true scope of Sanctuary Station. It wasn't just a structure. It was part of a vast network of similar stations, connected by streams of energy that pulsed with living light. "Come," she said. "Let me show you what we've been fighting." They entered a vast observation chamber where the walls, floor, and ceiling were all transparent. Beyond the station, space itself was at war. Streams of pure darkness writhed through the void between stars. Not just the absence of light, but the absence of existence itself. Where these tendrils touched normal matter, it simply ceased to be. Not destroyed, not converted, just removed from reality as if it had never existed. Against this darkness, human vessels fought alongside their transformed allies. But these weren't the ships from the historical records. These craft moved like living things, their hulls rippling with biomechanical systems that seemed to repair damage by growing new components. They fired weapons that bent space itself, creating barriers of twisted reality to contain the advancing darkness. "This is the Void," Chen said, her voice heavy with centuries of weariness. "It exists in the spaces between realities, feeding on existence itself. 300 years ago, it found a way into our universe through a dimensional rift in what you call the Barrier Nebula." Zexai watched in horror as one of the defender ships was touched by a tendril of darkness. The vessel simply wasn't there anymore. No explosion, no debris, just empty space where a ship and its crew had existed moments before. "How do you fight something like that?" "By becoming something it can't easily erase," replied the transformed Velthari. "We merged our biology with technology that exists partially outside normal space-time. We became living weapons designed to contain an enemy that shouldn't exist." Dr. Kisara's bioluminescent patches flickered with patterns of deep sorrow. "The cost was everything," Chen confirmed. "We gave up our humanity, our individual identities, even our right to exist in normal space. But in return, we gained the power to hold the line." Bolin, who had been silent throughout the tour, suddenly flickered into high visibility. "Captain, I'm detecting massive energy buildups throughout the station network. Something's happening." Through the transparent walls, they could see the human defense fleet taking new positions. The streams of darkness were moving differently, converging on a single point in space. "It's probing again," Chen said, her transformed features showing strain. "The void has been testing our defenses for decades, looking for weaknesses. I think it's finally found one." Alarms began sounding throughout the station. Not mechanical sounds, but harmonic frequencies that resonated directly with their nervous systems. The walls around them pulsed with urgent colors. "Commander?" Chen said, turning to Zexai with eyes that now blazed with stellar fire. "I need you and your crew to make a choice. The void has noticed your presence here. It sees you as a way into the greater galaxy. You can return to your ship and flee, but it will follow you home." "What's the alternative?" Chen's smile was no longer sad. It was fierce, predatory, and absolutely inhuman. "You can help us kill it." Brangter, Chapter 4, The Price of Victory. The transformed command center of Sanctuary Station buzzed with activity as beings from dozens of species worked together in perfect synchronization. But this wasn't the cooperation Zexai knew from the Galactic Council. This was something deeper, more intimate. The transformed beings were linked not just by communication, but by shared consciousness itself. "We call it the network," Chen explained as she guided Zexai's crew through preparations. "Individual identity becomes fluid. Personal goals merge with collective purpose. It's the only way to coordinate a defense across multiple dimensions of space-time." Dr. Kesara floated beside them, her tank's sensors recording everything. "The neural integration you're describing should be impossible. How do you maintain individual consciousness at all?" "We don't entirely," replied the being who had once been Veltari. "But what we lose in personal identity, we gain in capability. Watch." The transformed being raised what might have once been a hand. Reality rippled around the gesture, and suddenly Zexai could see the battle as the network saw it, not just in 3 dimensions, but across multiple layers of existence. The void wasn't just attacking their physical space. It was trying to erase the concept of their defense from reality itself. "The void doesn't just consume matter and energy," Chen continued. "It consumes information, possibility, the very idea that resistance is possible. A normal military response would be edited out of existence before it could be effective." Thok's massive form trembled as he processed what he was seeing. "How long can you hold it?" "We've been holding it for 3 centuries, said a new voice. Another human stepped forward, or rather something that had once been human. This being's body seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously, shifting between solid matter and pure energy. "But the cost grows heavier each year. We lose more of ourselves with every battle." Zexai studied the defense displays, his tactical mind working furiously. "What you need is fresh perspective, new approaches. That's why you let us in, isn't it? You're hoping we can see something you can't." Chen nodded. "The network gives us incredible coordination and power, but it also creates blind spots. We think too much alike now. We need minds that haven't been integrated, perspectives that are still purely individual." Warning klaxons began sounding throughout the station. Through the transparent walls, they could see the void's tendrils, moving with new purpose, striking at specific points in the defense grid with surgical precision. "It's adapting faster than usual," the energy being said, concern evident even in their fluctuating form. "Something about your presence here has accelerated its learning curve." Blinn flickered anxiously. "Captain, I'm detecting quantum resonance, patterns that match our ship's signature. The void is using our energy patterns as a template to understand our technology." "Which means," Yixela whispered, her wings now completely colorless with fear, "it knows how to find our home galaxy." The implications hit everyone simultaneously. The void wasn't just probing the human defenses, it was preparing to use the Wanderer's hope as a guide to untouched civilizations. "We have to leave," Zexai said. "Cut off its ability to track us back." "It's too late for that," Chen replied, grimly. "The moment you entered human space, it began analyzing your quantum signature. It already knows the path back to your galaxy." Through the station's networks, they could feel the collective despair of the network as this realization spread. Centuries of sacrifice, of holding the line, and now the very people they'd died to protect had accidentally opened a door for their enemy. "There is another way," the energy being said slowly. "But the cost." "Tell me," Zexhai demanded. Chen's transformed features showed a complexity of emotions that spanned species. "We can sever the void's connection to your quantum signature, but it requires integration. You and your crew would need to join the network permanently. Your individual identities would be preserved, but changed. You'd become like us." The bridge of the Wanderer's hope had never seemed so far away. "How long do we have to decide?" Thok asked. His answer came in the form of reality itself screaming. The void had found a weak point in the defense grid and was pouring through like liquid darkness. Ships that had fought for centuries were being erased from existence, their crews simply ceasing to be. "Now," Chen said. "The decision has to be now." Zexhai looked at his crew, beings he'd led into danger, friends who'd trusted him with their lives. In their faces he saw fear, determination, and something else. Acceptance. "What exactly does the integration process involve?" Dr. Kessera asked, ever the scientist even in the face of cosmic horror. "Your consciousness is networked with ours," Chen explained rapidly as more alarms began sounding. "Your body is enhanced with biomechanical systems that exist partially outside normal spacetime. You gain abilities beyond your species' natural limits, but you also become responsible for defending reality itself. And if we refuse, then you die here, and the void follows your quantum trail back to consume every thinking being in the known galaxy." It wasn't really a choice at all. "Do it," Zexhai said. The transformation was unlike anything any of them had imagined. Reality became fluid around them as their consciousness expanded beyond individual minds. Suddenly, Zexhai could feel not just his own thoughts, but the collective awareness of thousands of beings who had made the same choice over the centuries. He was still himself, but he was also more. His tactical mind, enhanced by the network's shared knowledge, could suddenly see patterns in the void's attack that had been invisible before. Yixela's navigation skills became omnidimensional, capable of plotting courses through folded space. Thok's strength became reality-warping force. Kessera's scientific knowledge merged with understanding of physics that transcended normal dimensional limitations. Belin's energy manipulation abilities expanded to encompass forces that existed in spaces between spaces. Together, they turned to face the void incursion. What followed wasn't battle as any of them had understood it before. They fought with weapons made of crystallized time, shields constructed from folded dimensions, and strategies that spanned multiple layers of reality. The void struck back with tendrils of pure negation, attempting to erase not just their bodies, but the very concept of their resistance. But the network held. More than held. For the first time in decades, they pushed the void back. Zexhai, his consciousness now spanning multiple dimensions simultaneously, found the key insight they needed. The void wasn't just consuming reality, it was trying to replace it with its own version of existence. But that replacement process had vulnerabilities, moments where it was forced to briefly exist in normal space-time. "There," he transmitted to the network, sharing his tactical analysis instantly with thousands of minds. "It has to anchor itself to create substitution events. Those anchor points can be targeted." The counterattack began immediately. Ships that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously struck at the void's anchor points with weapons that fired concentrated possibility itself. Where these weapons hit, the void's extension simply stopped. Not destroyed, but prevented from ever having existed in the first place. Hours passed, or perhaps centuries. Time flowed strangely in the combat zones. When the battle finally ended, the void had been pushed back beyond the dimensional barriers, its access to their reality severed. "For now, it will return," Chen said, as the network's attention turned to repair and rebuilding. "It always does, but this victory bought us time, maybe decades." Zexhai examined his new existence with senses that could perceive 17 different dimensions simultaneously. He was still recognizably himself, but enhanced beyond anything his species had ever achieved. The same was true for his crew. "Do you regret it?" he asked them through the network's shared consciousness. The response came as a harmony of thoughts and emotions that no single voice could have expressed. No, they didn't regret it. The cost had been high, but the alternative would have been the extinction of everything they'd ever cared about. Besides, Yixla added, her consciousness now capable of navigating spaces that existed between realities. "We're not the same people who entered human space, but we're not less than we were. We're more." Epilogue. The New Guardians 5. Years had passed since the Wanderer's hope had crossed into human space. In the Galactic Council chambers, the debate raged as it had every day since their ship had vanished. "We must assume they are dead," Elder Morthak stated, her crystalline form pulsing with resigned amber. "No one crosses into human space and returns." "But the energy readings from the border have changed," argued Council member Vextai, a young Gorvani who had been friends with Thok. "The boundary is more stable now. The gravitational anomalies have decreased by 40%. "Which could mean anything," replied Ambassador Kithera of the Machine Collective. "Perhaps their presence destabilized whatever processes were occurring there." The debate was interrupted by an impossible transmission. Impossible because it was coming from inside the human quarantine zone. The holographic display flickered to life, showing 5 figures standing on what appeared to be the bridge of a vessel unlike anything in known space. The ship itself seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its hull rippling with biomechanical systems that pulsed with their own inner light. At the center of the group stood a being that might once have been Zexhai. His basic form was recognizable, but his 4 eyes now held depths that seemed to contain starlight, and when he moved, space itself seemed to respond to his will. "Greetings, Galactic Council," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated directly in the listeners' minds. "This is Commander Zexhai, reporting from the border between realities." The council chamber erupted in chaos. Dozens of species began speaking simultaneously, their translation systems struggling to keep up with the cacophony of questions, demands, and expressions of disbelief. Zexhai raised a hand that now seemed to exist in several dimensions at once, and silence fell across the council like a blanket. "We know you have questions, we know you're afraid. But first you need to understand what we've learned about the universe we all share." The holographic display expanded, showing not just the group, but the space around their vessel. The vista beyond revealed a sight that made every being in the council chamber recoil in shock. The darkness was vast, not just the absence of light, but the absence of existence itself. It stretched across dimensions they couldn't fully perceive, held back only by barriers that pulsed with the combined will of thousands of transformed beings. "This is what lies beyond the edge of our reality," Zexhai continued. "An anti-existence that feeds on the concept of being itself. For 3 centuries, humanity and their allies have held it back. Now, we're part of that defense." Elder Morthak's form cycled through colors of deep contemplation. "You've been changed. We've been enhanced," corrected Dr. Kesara, her consciousness now existing in a form that could analyze the fundamental structure of reality itself. "We retain our individual identities, our personal memories, our connections to our home species, but we've also become something more." Yixila stepped forward, her transformed presence somehow managing to convey both her original Velthari grace and capabilities that transcended dimensional boundaries. "The barrier is stable now. The incursion has been contained. Your galaxy is safe." "For how long?" asked Ambassador Kithera, their mechanical nature allowing them to process the implications faster than organic minds. "Perhaps centuries," replied Belin, his energy form now capable of existing across multiple states of reality simultaneously. "Perhaps longer, but the vigil must be maintained." Thok's massive presence dominated the display as he moved forward. Even transformed, his protective nature remained unchanged. "We're sending this message to let you know we're still here. Still fighting. Still protecting everything we used to call home." "But you can never come back," Morthak said. and it wasn't a question. Scifi's enhanced features showed a complexity of emotions that spanned multiple dimensions of experience. No, what we've become is necessary here, but it would be dangerous in normal space. We exist partially outside reality now. Our presence in your galaxy would create instabilities. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The missing expedition hadn't been lost. They had become guardians of existence itself, voluntarily exiling themselves to protect everyone they'd left behind. "Is there anything we can do?" asked a voice from the back of the chamber. Council member Velsha, a young being whose species had only recently achieved interstellar travel. The transformed crew exchanged glances that somehow conveyed entire conversations across shared consciousness. "Continue growing," Sci said finally. "Continue exploring, learning, becoming more than you were. The universe is vast and full of wonders we've barely begun to understand. But also remember, some boundaries exist for good reasons. Some territories are quarantined not to keep you out, but to keep worse things from getting in." The transmission began to fade, but Scifi's voice came through clearly. "And if the day ever comes when the barriers fail, when the darkness breaks through despite our efforts, remember that you were worth the sacrifice. Every thinking being in the galaxy was worth becoming something more than human to protect." The hologram flickered out, leaving the council chamber in absolute silence. Elder Morthak was the first to speak, her ancient voice carrying a weight of new understanding. "Let it be recorded in the permanent archives. The human quarantine zone is to be respected absolutely, not because we fear what lies within, but because we honor those who chose to become its guardians." The motion was passed by unanimous consent, the first time in Galactic Council history that every species present had agreed on anything. In the years that followed, the border region stabilized further. Ships approaching the quarantine zone occasionally detected energy signatures that suggested massive vessels patrolling just beyond sensor range. Some claimed to have received brief transmissions, warnings to turn back, or sometimes just simple greetings from beings who had once been like them. The galaxy continued to grow and prosper, protected by guardians who had sacrificed their right to be part of what they protected. And in the depths of space between realities, the vigil continued, because some boundaries are worth becoming monsters to defend, and some monsters choose to be heroes instead. End of story. Additional scenes and extended epilogue. The ripple effect 10 years after Scifi's transmission to the Galactic Council. The effects of that revelation continued to reshape galactic civilization in ways no one had anticipated. In the archives of the Velthari homeworld, young historians studied the final logs of navigator Yixla with something approaching reverence. Her species had always prized exploration and discovery, but now they understood that some journeys led to destinations from which there was no return, and that sometimes that was exactly as it should be. "She could have turned back," whispered student Yixara, a distant cousin of the transformed navigator. "They all could have, but they chose to stay." Archivist Melthor's wings shifted to the deep blue of profound contemplation. Choice implies alternatives. Did they really have a choice, or did they simply recognize the inevitable and embrace it with grace? The question had sparked philosophical debates across dozens of worlds. What defined heroism? Was it the willingness to sacrifice everything, or the wisdom to recognize when sacrifice was necessary? The Watchers on the edge of human space. Other changes were taking place. The Galactic Council had established Monitoring Station Threshold, a heavily shielded outpost positioned exactly 1 light-year from the quarantine boundary. Its mission was simple: watch for changes in the barrier, maintain communication protocols with the Guardians, and serve as an early warning system for the rest of civilization. Commander Relkos, a Gorvani who had served under Thok before his transformation, stood before the massive sensor array that dominated the station's central hub. The readings were as stable as they'd been for the past several years, but something felt different today. "Status report," he rumbled to his mixed-species crew. "Border integrity holding at optimal levels," reported Science Officer Tavara, of Elthari, whose wings displayed patterns of focused concentration. Energy fluctuations are within normal parameters, no signs of incursion activity. Communications specialist Zeph, one of the few humans to serve in this capacity, looked up from her station with a puzzled expression. "Sir, I'm receiving a transmission from Sanctuary Station. It's different from the usual patrol check-ins." "Different? How?" "It's addressed to all species representatives aboard Threshold. The message says they want to share something important about the nature of the defense grid." Relkos felt a chill run through his massive frame. In the decade since contact had been re-established, the Guardians had been forthcoming about tactical situations, but had shared little about their actual transformation or capabilities. "Put it through to the main display." The hologram that materialized was immediately recognizable as Zexhai, but the changes in him were more pronounced than they had been 10 years ago. His form seemed to exist in a state of constant, subtle flux, not unstable, but rather perfectly adapted to multiple dimensional states simultaneously. "Greetings, Threshold Station. I hope this transmission finds you well and vigilant." Zexhai's voice carried new harmonics, frequencies that seemed to resonate with the station's hull itself. "We're contacting you because we've reached a milestone in our understanding of the Void's nature, and we believe it's time to share some difficult truths about what we've learned." The display expanded to show not just Zexhai, but the space around Sanctuary Station. What the Threshold crew saw defied their understanding of physics. The station had grown, not just in size, but in dimensional complexity. Structures extended into spaces that shouldn't exist, connected by conduits of what appeared to be crystallized time itself. "Over the past decade, we've learned that the Void isn't just a single entity," Zexhai continued. "It's part of something larger, a kind of cosmic immune system that exists in the spaces between realities. Our universe and countless others like it represent what it perceives as infections in the fabric of existence itself." Dr. Kesara materialized beside Zexhai, her transformed presence now encompassing what appeared to be a small ocean of sentient water that defied all containment. "We've made contact with Guardians from other realities, beings like us who became something more to defend their own universes against the same threat. The multiverse, it seems, is under siege." The implications hit the Threshold crew like a physical blow. They weren't just dealing with a single incursion, but with a war that spanned multiple realities. "However," Yixla's voice added, though she herself remained unseen, "we've also discovered something that changes everything. The Void can be permanently defeated, but the cost..." The transmission flickered, and when it stabilized, all 5 members of the original Wanderer's Hope crew were visible. They stood together, but something in their positioning suggested they were no longer entirely separate individuals. "The final solution requires a sacrifice that would affect not just us, but every thinking being in our reality," Thok said, his massive presence somehow conveying both gentleness and cosmic power. "We wanted the Council to know that the choice exists, even if we're not ready to make it yet." "What kind of choice?" Relkos asked, though he wasn't sure if his transmission could reach them. Belin's energy form pulsed with patterns that suggested deep sadness. "To defeat the Void permanently, we would need to merge our reality with several others, creating a stable, superdimensional structure that the Void couldn't penetrate or erode. But such a merger would fundamentally change the nature of existence for every being in every affected universe." "Change how?" Tavara whispered. "Everyone would become like us," Zexhai said simply. "Transformed, enhanced, existing partially outside, normal spacetime. Death as you understand it would become impossible, but so would the kind of individual existence you've always known." The transmission began to fade, but Zexhai's final words came through clearly. "We're not asking for a decision now. We're simply letting you know that the ultimate choice between transformation and eternal vigilance may someday need to be made. When that time comes, we wanted you to understand what it would mean." The Council's dilemma, the debate that followed Zexhai's revelation, raged for months across the Galactic Council. Species that had coexisted peacefully for centuries found themselves divided along philosophical lines that threatened the very foundation of their civilization. Elder Morthak, now ancient even by her species' standards, stood before the assembled. Representatives with her crystalline form pulsing deep purple, the color of profound uncertainty. "We face a choice that no civilization should have to make," she said, her voice carrying the weight of millennia. "Accept transformation and lose our essential selves, or maintain our current existence under the eternal threat of annihilation." Ambassador Kithara of the Machine Collective processed the dilemma with the cold logic of their artificial nature. From a purely mathematical standpoint, the solution is clear. Transformation guarantees survival. Our current path guarantees only continued risk. But survival is what? Demanded Representative Velnox of the artistic communes. If we become something else entirely, have we truly survived? Or have we simply created sophisticated copies of ourselves? The debate was interrupted by an unexpected voice, young council member Velshaw, who had been silent throughout most of the discussion. "With respect to the Elder Council," she said, rising from her place among the junior representatives, "I think we're approaching this incorrectly." Every eye in the chamber turned to her. As one of the youngest beings ever to serve on the council, her words carried weight primarily because of their rarity. "We're debating as if this decision must be made now, by us, for everyone. But the Guardians aren't asking us to choose. They're telling us that the choice exists, so that when the time comes, if it comes, we won't be caught unprepared." Elder Morthak's form shifted to curious amber. "Continue." "The Guardians have been protecting us for centuries without asking for our permission or input. They've paid the price of transformation so that we could continue to exist as we are. The least we can do is trust their judgment about when, or if, that final choice needs to be made." A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. For all their philosophical differences, every species present shared a deep respect for the sacrifice the Guardians had made. "I propose," Velsha continued, "that we formally acknowledge the Guardians' revelation, but that we take no immediate action. Instead, we focus on what we can do. Continue to grow, continue to learn, continue to become worthy of the protection we've been given." The motion passed by the largest margin in council history. The long vigil years flowed into decades, and decades into centuries. The galaxy continued to evolve and prosper under the protection of its transformed guardians. New species achieved interstellar travel, and were welcomed into the galactic community. Old conflicts were resolved as civilizations matured. Art, science, and philosophy flourished in ways that would have been impossible under the constant threat of annihilation. And on the border between realities, the vigil continued. The Guardians had evolved as well, becoming something that transcended their original forms while still maintaining the essential qualities that had made them who they were. They were no longer entirely individual, but they weren't entirely collective either. They had become something new, a form of existence that balanced personal identity with cosmic responsibility. They watched over their protected galaxy with patience, born of understanding that some duties transcended personal desire. They fought battles in dimensions that the beings they protected couldn't even perceive. They made decisions that affected the fundamental structure of reality itself. And sometimes, in quiet moments between crises, they remembered what it had been like to be merely mortal. "Do you ever regret it?" Zexhai asked during one such moment, his consciousness touching those of his transformed crew through the network they had helped to build. The response came not as words, but as a harmony of thoughts and emotions that spanned multiple dimensions of experience. No, they didn't regret their choice. The cost had been everything they once were, but what they had become was something greater than the sum of their individual parts. They were guardians now, in the truest sense of the word. Not just protectors of their galaxy, but shepherds of existence itself. And in a universe where the forces of unbeing constantly pressed against the boundaries of reality, that was a purpose worthy of any sacrifice. The galaxy slept peacefully, unaware of the cosmic forces held at bay by beings who had once been like them. And in the spaces between stars, between dimensions, between what was and what could never be allowed to become, the Guardians maintained their eternal watch. Because some boundaries were worth becoming more than human to defend, and because some transformations were not losses but ascensions to something greater than any single species could achieve alone. The Rindikao